Billionaire freezes when he sees his black ex-wife at airport, with triplets who look just like him. Cadwell Alexander Sterling's heart, a fortress of ice and steel that commanded boardrooms and toppled empires, stopped. Just stopped. Across the sea of travelers, he saw a ghost. Isabella. The woman who had been his sun and his storm, the one he'd let walk away. But it wasn't her ghost that froze the blood in his veins. It was the three small boys clutching her hands, each one with his charcoal gray eyes, his stubborn jawline, his face. A living, breathing secret she had kept for 5 years. His empire was built on control. And in a single, gut-wrenching moment, he realized he had never been in control of anything at all. Hey, story lover! Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go. The phone, displaying a $500 million contract, slipped from his numb fingers. It hit the polished marble floor of the private terminal at LAX with a sickening crack, the sound swallowed by the ambient chaos of airport announcements and rolling suitcases. But Cadwell heard none of it. His world had narrowed to a single, impossible tableau 60 yards away. Isabella Rossi. Her proud, defiant posture was the same. Her cascade of dark curls still bounced with a life of its own. But she was no longer the free-spirited art historian he had loved. She was a mother, a protector, a lioness flanked by her cubs. And those cubs, they were him. Miniature carbon copies. One boy pointed at a plane taking off, his expression one of pure wonder, the same expression Cadwell's own father said he'd had as a child. Another tugged on her coat, his brow furrowed with the same impatient intensity Cadwell saw in the mirror every morning before a hostile takeover. The third simply held her hand, watching the world with quiet, calculating eyes that felt terrifyingly familiar. 5 years. The math was simple. The implications were devastating. His security detail, 2 stoic men in dark suits, moved towards him. "Mr. Sterling? Is everything all right?" asked Arthur, his head of security for a decade. Cadwell couldn't form words. The air in his lungs had turned to ice. He could only point a trembling finger. Arthur's professional gaze followed, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before his training kicked in, his expression becoming an unreadable mask. "I see her, sir." "Find out where she's going. Find out everything," Cadwell finally managed to rasp, his voice raw. "Don't let her leave this city." But it was already too late. As if sensing his stare across the crowded terminal, Isabella's head snapped up. Her warm, brown eyes, once filled with adoration for him, met his. There was a flash of shock, then something else. Not fear, not regret. It was pure, burning fury. A cold, hard wall of resentment that hit him even from that distance. She tightened her grip on the boy's hands, turned her back on him with a finality that was like a slap in the face, and disappeared into the throng heading for the exit. The legacy he never knew he had, swallowed by the crowd. Left standing amidst the shattered glass of his phone and the ruins of his composure, the billionaire who owned the sky felt like he was in a freefall, brought crashing down to earth by 3 little secrets he never knew existed. Back in the soundproof sanctuary of his armored Maybach, Cadwell stared blankly at the cityscape blurring past. The dropped phone had been replaced, but the damage was done. His world, once a meticulously ordered universe of assets and acquisitions, had been tilted on its axis. He didn't just feel anger, he felt a profound, hollowing grief for 5 years of missed first words, first steps, 5 years of missed birthdays. 3 sets of them. "We have a problem, Arthur," he said, his voice dangerously low. Ms. Rossi took a cab. "We lost visual in the traffic on Sepulveda. My team is running the cab company's manifest and pulling traffic camera footage now, sir. We'll find her," Arthur replied, his tone calm and reassuring, a stark contrast to the tempest raging inside Cadwell. "It's not enough," Cadwell snapped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time in years. Why did she leave? Why did she never tell me? The questions echoed in the silent car. He pulled up the last photo he had of her on his new phone. It was from their anniversary, just weeks before she vanished. They were smiling, incandescently happy. Or so he had thought. His mind replayed the brutal, clean break. He had returned from a 2-week business trip to Asia to find her apartment cleared out. A short, sterile note was left on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore, Cadwell. Don't come looking for me." It was a surgical wound, quick and deep. When he tried to call, the number was disconnected. Emails bounced back. She had scrubbed her existence from his life as if she were a ghost. But the reason for the note, the reason for his heartbreak, had been delivered to him with cold, calculating precision by the one person he trusted implicitly, his mother, Eleanor Sterling. The memory was vivid. He was in his penthouse, the breakup note crumpled in his fist, when Eleanor had arrived, a vision of icy elegance. She'd placed a manila envelope on his marble table. "I'm sorry, my darling," she had said, her voice laced with feigned sympathy. "I had my suspicions. Isabella wasn't who you thought she was." Inside were photographs. Grainy, long-lens shots of Isabella laughing with another man, entering a hotel, looking far too intimate. "He's an artist," Eleanor had explained softly. From her past. "It seemed she couldn't give up her bohemian lifestyle for you. She chose him." The betrayal had been absolute. The pain was so immense that it had cauterized itself into pure, cold rage. He'd ordered his lawyers to erase every trace of Isabella Rossi from his life, to build a wall so high she could never climb back over it. He funneled his heartbreak into his work, becoming more ruthless, more powerful, turning Sterling Industries into a global behemoth. He had buried his past, or so he thought. Now he realized he hadn't buried it. He had only buried his head in the sand. Looking at the photo on his phone, he saw it now. The man in the picture with Isabella. There was something off about the lighting, the way her hand rested on his arm. It looked staged. "Arthur," Cadwell said, his voice chillingly calm. "Get me the original file on Isabella Rossi. The one my mother gave me 5 years ago. I want the original photographs, the investigator's raw data. Everything." "Right away, sir." The call came 3 hours later. Cadwell was pacing his penthouse, the city lights of Los Angeles twinkling below like a galaxy he owned but couldn't feel. "We found her, sir," Arthur said. "An apartment in Pasadena. Modest. She's listed as a freelance art curator. The boys are named Kai, Leo, and Noah." Arthur paused. "There's something else, sir. I have the files you requested. The photographs from 5 years ago. Our digital forensics team took a quick look. They're composites, sir. Very good ones, but fakes. She was never with that man. The hotel records show he was a client she was meeting in the lobby cafe. The timeline of her calls and messages to you during your Asia trip, she sent dozens, sir. Texts, voicemails. They were all intercepted. They never reached your phone." The fortress of ice and steel around Cadwell's heart didn't just crack, it detonated. The fury he had felt for Isabella, the betrayal that had fueled him for 5 years, instantly redirected itself, coalescing into a white-hot nova of rage aimed squarely at one person, his mother. Eleanor Sterling hadn't just comforted her grieving son. She had orchestrated the entire tragedy. She had stolen his love, his future, and his son's. Without another word, Cadwell grabbed his keys. "Send me the address, Arthur. I'm going there now." "Sir, perhaps a more delicate approach would be." "The time for delicacy is over." Isabella's apartment complex was a quiet, respectable building with a small courtyard, a universe away from the cold glass and chrome of Cadwell's world. He strode through the gate, his bespoke suit looking alien in the humble surroundings. He found her door, number 2B, and knocked, his knuckles rapping against the wood with a force that betrayed the storm inside him. The door opened, and there she was. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, her face devoid of makeup, and she was even more beautiful than he remembered. Her eyes, however, were guarded, filled with the same fury he'd seen at the airport. "Cadwell," she said, her voice tight. "You shouldn't be here." She tried to close the door, but he blocked it with his hand. 5 years, Isabella. 5 years you kept them from me. Kept them from you, she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You threw me away. I called you, Cadwell. I left you messages. I told you I had something important to tell you, that I was pregnant. And what did I get back? Silence. Then a letter from your lawyer with a check and a non-disclosure agreement, telling me to never contact you again. You didn't want me. You didn't want them. Every word was a punch to the gut. The intercepted calls. The lawyer's letter he never authorized. It was all his mother. He had been a puppet, and Isabella had been the victim of his blindness. I never got those messages, he stammered, the conviction draining from his voice. Isabella, I swear to you, I never knew. It's a little late for that, she said, her voice cracking with the pain of 5 years of solitary struggle. I built a life for us. A good life. Without you. From behind her, a small voice piped up. Mommy, who is the loud man? A little boy with charcoal gray eyes and a stubborn jawline peeked around her leg, clutching a toy dinosaur. It was Leo. And in that moment, seeing his son in the flesh, the abstract concept of fatherhood became a crushing, overwhelming reality. The rage, the confusion, it all momentarily vanished, replaced by a profound, aching need to know this little person who was half of him. Leo, go back inside, sweetie, Isabella said gently, her body still forming a barrier. But the confrontation was far from over. Suddenly, Isabella's expression shifted from anger to exhaustion, a deep, painful weariness that seemed to settle in her bones. Why were you at the airport, Isabella? Where were you going? Cadwell asked, his tone softening. She hesitated, her jaw tightening. It doesn't concern you. Everything about you and those boys concerns me, he insisted. She finally broke, her shoulders slumping. We were flying to a specialist in San Francisco. A consultation. She took a shaky breath. Leo, he's sick, Cadwell. He has a rare form of aplastic anemia. His body isn't producing enough new blood cells. He needs a bone marrow transplant. We've been on the registry for a year. There are no matches. The world tilted again. This wasn't just about a secret, it was about life and death. A family member is the best hope, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. Kai and Noah aren't matches. I was going to the clinic as a last resort to see if there were any experimental treatments. The unsaid words hung in the air between them. You could be a match. You could be his only chance. The reason for her appearance wasn't a coincidence. It was desperation. She wasn't trying to break his world. She was trying to save their sons. The next day was a blur of frenetic action. Cadwell leveraged his immense resources. Calls were made. The world's top pediatric hematologists were consulted. A suite at the best private hospital in the state was secured. Cadwell and the other 2 boys, Kai and Noah, were all tested for compatibility. The atmosphere between Cadwell and Isabella was thick with tension, a fragile truce held together by a thread of shared fear for their son. While they waited for the results, Cadwell made another call. Mother. My office. 1 hour. Eleanor Sterling swept into the penthouse boardroom of Sterling Industries like a queen surveying her domain. She was immaculate in a Chanel suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Cadwell, darling. To what do I owe the pleasure? She asked, smiling. Cadwell didn't smile back. He sat at the head of the massive obsidian table, his face a mask of cold fury. He slid a folder across the polished surface. Do you recognize these? Eleanor opened it. Inside were the faked photographs of Isabella, alongside a detailed report from Cadwell's forensics team and printouts of the intercepted, blocked messages. Her smile faltered for only a second before being replaced by a look of steely resolve. "I did what was necessary to protect this family," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That girl was a distraction. She would have diluted your ambition, our legacy." "Our legacy?" Cadwell's voice was dangerously quiet. "You're talking about a legacy, and I have a son, one of 3 sons you stole from me, lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. He needs a transplant I might have been able to give him years ago if you hadn't poisoned my life with your lies." "Don't be dramatic. You built an empire. I helped you do that." "You built a cage," he roared, slamming his fist on the table, the sound echoing through the vast room. "You didn't protect a legacy, Mother. You destroyed one. You are no longer a member of this board. You are no longer a part of this company. Your accounts will be frozen. You are out." For the first time in his life, Cadwell saw a crack in his mother's invincible facade. Shock, disbelief, and then fury. "You would choose her over your own mother?" "I am choosing my sons," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Something you never did for me." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the cavernous room, a queen dethroned. The call from the hospital came an hour later. Cadwell was a perfect match for Leo. The days leading up to the transplant were a crucible of raw emotion. Cadwell and Isabella spent hours at the hospital, watching over Leo, speaking in hushed tones. The anger between them slowly began to dissolve, replaced by a shared vulnerability. He learned about his sons. Kai was the adventurous leader, Noah the quiet observer, and Leo was the sweet, sensitive soul who loved dinosaurs and drawing. He learned about Isabella's struggles as a single mother, the sacrifices she'd made, the fierce, unyielding love that had kept her going. She, in turn, saw a side of Cadwell she'd never known, not the corporate titan, but a terrified father, his immense power utterly useless in the face of his child's mortality. The surgery was a success. As Leo slowly recovered, color returning to his cheeks, the sterile hospital room began to feel less like a prison and more like a space of rebirth. Weeks later, the California sun streamed down on a public park in Pasadena. The sound of children's laughter filled the air. In the middle of it all was Cadwell Alexander Sterling, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled up, a smear of mud on his expensive trousers. He was on his hands and knees, pretending to be a roaring Trex, being chased by 3 giggling, identical little boys. Isabella watched from a nearby bench, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in years. Their relationship was still undefined, a fragile landscape scarred by years of pain and deception. The trust was not yet rebuilt, the wounds not yet healed. But as she watched the man who had once been the master of a financial universe now being masterfully commanded by his 3-foot-tall sons, she felt a flicker of something she thought had been extinguished forever. Hope. Cadwell caught her eye and smiled back, a real, unguarded smile. He had lost the illusion of control. The fortress of ice and steel had been torn down, brick by painful brick. But in its place, he was building something new. A messy, chaotic, unpredictable, and infinitely more valuable life. He had reclaimed his sons, but can a love shattered by such a deep betrayal ever truly be rebuilt? That is a story for another time.